Or is it sap your energy?
I just take the rest of it.
The rest is recovery time.
Holy smokes. I'm in a good mood.
You are. You're pulling the daggers out. We had a workshop. And Phil had to make a choice.
Thank you, Bill. Bill Goosey is the name, G-U-S-E. Not to be confused with Bill V. Where's Bill V? Oh, somewhere here. The founder, the real troublemaker of the group. His strategy is if anybody's going to get shot down, it's the guy in the podium, right? So, Bill Van Druten. And then many of you here who were involved in the beginning, founding of the group, part of it had to do with protesting the Ten Commandments monument. When was that? 10 years ago or whatever? Oh, 6 years ago? Okay. And then something to do with the hospitals and that. So not just a group of thinkers and socializers, but a group of doers. And Bill G., in his very eloquent remarks, besides that, he's a wonderful host. I got to stay at his other name is Bob, by the way, in case you want to know. I got to stay at his wonderful cabin on the lake last night. Points out that, you know, the herding cats analogy. Richard Dawkins, in his latest book, The God Delusion, mentioned that trying to organize free thinkers is like trying to herd cats. And he admits that's an old joke. But he says, if you get enough cats together, they can make an awful lot of noise. So this is like a movement. It's like an unusual movement, a movement with no followers. Everyone in this sort of organic, voluntary, non-coercive group is their own leader. We're all free thinkers. We all do our own, and it's almost a miracle when you think about it that a group of us, all leaders, all free thinkers, rejecting authority and dogmatism, that we can occasionally get together to do something. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's the human spirit. That's the human part of what it means to be a thinker and to be alive. And that's amazing. You know, as soon as one of us got up and said, I am now the bishop of atheism, well, then everybody would leave, right? I mean, you know, it doesn't work like that, the hierarchical structure. We are all equal, truly democratic. We're all human beings with an equal place at the table. There is no privileged clergy who get all these special breaks and admiration and respect because we have the word reverend in front of our name. We all have to prove our own case, like Bill was saying. We have to make our case on its merits, not because of authority, not because tradition says it's true, not because some dogma says it's true. So neither of us can welcome you to free thought. We're all part of the same basic movement. I think we can all sense that something's happening in the country. Something kind of intangible, but interesting and exciting to those of us who are non-believers. The country is today much less religious than it used to be by all the studies. Who knows what is the fastest growing religious identification in the United States right now? None. Yeah, non-religion is currently the fastest growing, quote-unquote, religion in the United States. In 1990, about 7% of Americans picked non-religion, whatever that means. And some of them might have been believers of some sort of spiritual whatever, and that included atheists and agnostics and secular humanists and other types of radical thinkers like us. But in the year 2001, the same group did the same survey again, and it was up to 14.5%, almost 15%. While other groups were shrinking in numbers and in percentages, non-believers were growing all through that time. And then just last year, and the study was released earlier this year, the American Religious Identification Survey, the principal researcher was Barry Cosman, who's going to speak at our conference in Seattle in November. Reported the number is now 16% who picked non-religion. And he says, if you include the people who chose not to respond in the survey, that was another 4 or 5% of people. basically, those people who chose not to respond, their lives pretty much parallel the lives and lifestyles of those who are non-religious. So if we include that group, about 20% of Americans do not choose to be religious for one reason or another. That's a fast-growing percentage, and it's interesting that it's not happening as a result of some organized movement. It's not because of our billboards. We have a lot of billboards around the country and bus signs. It's not necessarily because of what you and I are doing to try to proselytize. Think about what happened in Europe. In Europe, after centuries of religious divisions, centuries of fighting, 30 years war, Catholics versus Protestants, and Calvin and Luther, and all this stuff is going on, people getting killed, Protestants killing Protestants because they had the wrong idea about the Trinity. After all these years of fighting and religion and, you know, the seat of the Roman Catholic and all this, you know, all this stuff, Lutheranism, today, most Europeans are thoroughly secular. Today, especially in countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, in Denmark, it's only 4 or 5% of the population who identify themselves as religious. Only, it's a very small number. These are happy people. They have good lives. They're well off. They're raising their families. In fact, when Phil Zuckerman, the sociologist, interviewed the Danes, and he tells it in his new book called Societies Without God, which shows, by the way, that the societies that are the least religious are the better off in almost every single measure of well-being and happiness and all that. He was surprised when he interviewed the Danes. He said about 15% of the people that he asked the question, what are your views about God? About 15% said, I never thought of that. And he said, what do you mean you never thought of that? How can you never have thought about that? And they said, I don't know, what are our views about God? They were just busy, you know, mowing the lawn, paying the rent, raising their kids. They never thought about it. Can you imagine that? Here in America, never having thought about the question, but you don't need to. When life is good, you don't need. Even Jesus, if you believe that the Jesus character actually existed and said these things, even Jesus said, they who are healthy don't need the doctor, right? It's only they who are sick who need to go to the physician. So we free thinkers, we non-believers, don't consider ourselves sick. We don't consider ourselves sinners. You know, life, pretty much life is good with its lumps here and there. But whatever it was that happened in Europe seems to be starting to happen here in the United States. And it's pretty exciting, especially among the younger crowd. The teenagers, the college age, the 20-somethings are the least religious slice of the American population. 25% to 30% of them, and in some areas like 40% of the young people are thoroughly non-religious. Not only is that larger than that segment has ever been before, but they're staying that way. They're just like whatever happened in Europe. We don't think any atheist missionaries went over to Europe and proselytized them to give up their faith. Did that happen? What it was just an organic thing, rising from below without any authoritarian structure telling these people, here's what you must believe or not believe. It's just a natural, organic human thing. I happen to feel, and my wife Annie Lori feels, that the natural human being is not religious. The natural, basic human being is just a good, moral person. Of course, on the bell curve of distributions, there's going to be some sick people over here. But, you know, when somebody commits a horrible deed, imagine some horrible crime you read about in the paper. What do you say? You say, what an inhuman thing to do. Don't we assume that the natural human thing to do is a good thing? Altruistic, we evolve with these basic tendencies, with some exceptions, these basic tendencies to be kind and good to each other. So I think it's pretty exciting, and this meeting today is one more evidence that something is happening. Groups like this are sprouting up all over the country. College groups are sprouting up, and each one that grows up thinks they're the only one. And then they're surprised to learn, oh, there's others out there. It's like an accidental upside-down movement of organic free thought. Another evidence of a change, I think, is these best-selling atheist books that we see. I don't think the atheist books are necessarily creating converts. Maybe some of them are. But I think that market is just out there. And when Dawkins and Harris and Hitchens and Dennett and Stenger and others publish these books, this is what they're called the New Atheism. And by the way, Victor Stenger has a new book called The New Atheist, which sort of summarizes this recent new movement. It's